Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. Today, really happy to kind of bring out a lot of my favorite, most nostalgic comics, because, today we're talking about Venom and Carnage comics, and, we'll kind of get into all these picks and a kind of a CGC 9.8 analysis of each. But I think right now it's kind of an interesting time in the market for Venom and Carnage comics. I'm seeing some pretty attractive prices, which is making me think of adding, some more CGC 9.8s of some of these issues. And, I got to thinking, is it a good time to buy Venom and Carnage comics, in the current market environment, given, we always talk about if there's a movie or a show out, that's a lot of sort of added promotion is going to jack up prices a little bit. So you kind of don't want to buy in those environments, but I think right now, it's not a perfect environment to buy Symbiote's comic books and Venom and Carnage comic books, but I still think it's probably going to be about as good of a time as ever to, grab these books. So right now, I got two sort of main reasons why I think right now, Venom and Carnage key issues and everything to do with symbiotes are kind of a good buy right now. So two really simple reasons. First reason, there's no or very little promotion right now. So we're in between the Venom movies. So, it's not as good as sort of buying before the Venom movie ever came out or something like that. Like, that would be ideal, because then you're probably going to get the best price. And then, as soon as the trailer of the movie came out, a lot of these books ended up doing really well and shot up in price. So, but in between movies right now, so you could imagine there's going to be a lot more promotion for Venom 2 coming out. So you kind of want to, essentially get in before then. But I think there's a lot of potential with Venom 2, because with Carnage, Carnage is going to be played by Woody Harrelson. I think just both Venom and Carnage together is a lot more nostalgic for a lot of people. I think it'll do a lot better at the box office. Venom did pretty good, but I think they'll kind of learn from how Venom 1 did okay, and, hopefully Venom 2 has Carnage and hopefully even SpiderMan in it too. But I think there's a lot of potential to right now sort of buy them in a somewhat non-promotion-filled environment, and then not really sell them into the next movie, but just feel good about maybe seeing some higher prices during that time. It's not a perfect time because Absolute Carnage is out right now. So, that limited series in the comic book community is doing really good. It's selling so well. So not the perfect, most perfect time to buy Symbiotes and Carnage comics, maybe a little bit more, but as I said, about as good of a time as ever, because certainly once that first Venom trailer hit for the first Venom movie, these books got all really hot, and that probably wouldn't have been the best time to buy. Certainly if I was making this video during that, I'd be saying probably not to buy. But right now, I think, you could definitely be patient and strategic and look to purchase because there's not a lot of promotion. Yeah, and the second reason is just these, Venom and Carnage, they're just so popular and iconic. And even if there wasn't a movie coming out, I would still be recommending these books because of just the straight up cult following. There's not a lot of, Deadpool comes to mind, but there's not a lot of 80s and 90s first appearances that are just like so popular now. And there's just a huge cult following throughout the comic book community. And Venom and Carnage definitely has that. So, even if there wasn't a movie, I'd still be recommending these. But since there are movies, you want to buy them when there's no trailers out for the movies. And, again, I don't think it's a perfect time because there's a little bit of hype being generated from Absolute Carnage, but about as good of a time as ever to search for deals on these books. So that's my two reasons. No promotion, and then, the second reason is just they're so popular and iconic, and I'd be recommending them even if there wasn't a movie. So I got 5 recommendations here in the CGC 9.8, so we'll go on the CGC census and have a look at them. But, I was kind of racking my brain. There's a couple other issues I'll maybe mention at the end that could have made it on the list, but I think these are just kind of the ones to get if you're into Venom and Carnage. So first book is Amazing Spider-Man number 316. Yeah, first kind of cool Venom cover. The issue before this has his like little face on it with Hydro Man, but this is like the first Venom cover pretty much. Classic Todd McFarlane cover. cover's been cover homaged quite a few times too. So looking on the census though, there's 872 in the CGC 9.8, which is not too bad actually for just such an iconic cover. And you'd almost think there would be more. Certainly when you look at some of these other books too that we'll check out. 9.8 ratio is 29.5%. So kind of an average to maybe a little bit higher CGC 9.8 ratio, not anything to write home about, which is why this book, the one online I was kind of mentioning, I believe, yeah, it was $240 American right now. And I see quite a lot of these on my pricing video go for like $260, $275. So this is kind of the issue I was mentioning when I saw one up as a buy it now for $240, which I thought was like just a really good price. Like even in auctions, I feel like they go for more than that sometimes. And that kind of what almost got the idea for this video going. Like, oh, is it a good time to buy these comics? So next issue, I would recommend if you're looking for Venom and Carnage comics. And actually, you know, with Carnage comics, there's so many. He's got a lot of like mini-series, and there's like Maximum Carnage issues from Amazing Spider-Man and Web of Spider-Man. There's a lot of Carnage books out there, but a lot of one-offs he had and mini-series, but from the 90s. Honestly, I would almost forget all about that though and go for the first appearance of Carnage. This is a book you can kind of easily find, and there's no other more classic 90s cover than this one. It's honestly a super classic 90s cover. I think I do have a good feeling about this book. I think it's one of those books that are so obvious and people kind of downplay, and there's so many on the CGC census. Look at that really quick. 3,246 CGC 9.8 on the census. So a lot of these books. But a lot of people, a lot of collectors are, oh, there's so many, first Carnages out there. It's not the best book to get. But I think because it's the first appearance of Carnage and because the cover is just so classic, it reminds me a bit of Incredible Hulk 181, the cover. Like, Incredible Hulk 181 is just a classic mid-70s Bronze Age cover, like the coolest one, basically, with a first appearance of Wolverine. This book is such an early 90s classic cover. It just has everything. Cool colors, a first appearance of Carnage, too. And, the Amazing Spider-Man titled book was so popular during this time, I would say, kind of the McFarlane and Mark Bagley era. So, really quick, the 9.8 ratio is 27%. So pretty bang on average, I would say, for like a not really relatively rare or anything. But yeah, I got a feeling about this book. It's just such an obvious book. And I think right now, like, I bought my one in the newsstand for $405, I believe it was. So just over $400. Newsstand one, a little more rare. Direct one, saw one sell last week for $370. But I'd recommend to buy this book. It's one where, you don't want to look at the CGC census and go, oh, there's so many out there, and like, I don't want it. I just think the coolness of the character and the cover gives it a really good chance of, like, over time to be worth a lot more than like $400 in the CGC 9.8. I think anyway. Certainly maybe get up to that kind of Deadpool level, I think, in value. So next book is certainly if you're kind of a serious collector, and which I kind of, for 80s and 90s books, I do consider myself a serious collector. The book to kind of get is a CGC 9.8 version of Amazing Spider-Man 300, first full appearance of Venom, Origin, first full appearance. So CGC census, looking on that. In the blue label now, there's 1,005 of these in the CGC 9.8. So good, just got over 1,000. I think since our last video we did, it was like 980 or something like that. So still a couple 9.8s out there getting graded. Why this book is so expensive is that CGC 9.8 ratio, which is a 5.9%. So the lower the better with these ratios. And so of all graded copies of this book, 5.9% of them are CGC 9.8s. So really, really low percentage of relative rareness, 5.9%. It's just so rare. That's why, I paid $1,980 for this book. And this one is a really nice one, really great colors, nicely centered, no pages sticking out the side or the top. So, in a new case too. So you're looking at about $2,000, maybe even over $2,000 for one like this, looking really, really good. With some pages sticking out the side of the top, the prices go down, but yeah, that's kind of normal for most sort of high-grade comics. Maybe in an old case, in an auction where some of the pages are sticking out and things like that, but nonetheless, it's CGC 9.8 white pages. You might be able to get it for like $1,500, $1,600, maybe if you get lucky, in an old case. Not looking the best kind of thing. But you know what? Yeah, I'd recommend to grab this one if it's in your budget. First appearance of Venom. This is the classic Todd McFarlane cover. Obviously, he's been cover homaged a million times. And I just think over time it's going to do really well. Similar to kind of sentiments to Amazing Spider-Man 361. Just the classic 80s cover, the classic 90s cover. A lot to like for both of those issues. And the extra kind of icing on the cake for Amazing Spider-Man 300 is on the CGC census. It's amazing. It's the best 80s book on the census. So, sort of that somewhat popular. I'm sure there's some obscure book in TMNT #1 first print. But besides that, such an investment grade, amazing book to get if it's in your budget. Again, pretty expensive. But next book is a book I don't have. It's Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars #8, Origin of the Black Costume that eventually becomes Venom. And a classic book. This is one that's available quite often. I probably would have picked this up if, it seemed every one that kind of had some cheap shipping to go to Canada every one that was from my favorite sellers wasn't really nicely centered, or maybe had kind of dim colors or something like that. So this is one I've never ended up picking up. But looking on the census, there's 3,296 of these in the CGC 9.8. So a lot of them in the CGC 9.8. This book kind of goes from sometimes you see them under 200, sorry. So anywhere from 175 to 250, you see this book go for. If it looks, really amazing in a new case, maybe it'll sell for 250 at a buy it now if it's perfectly centered in a new case. You see quite a lot of these sell for 200, to be honest. One you can be patient on because there's 3,296 out there, so a lot of them out there. Pretty much the same amount of these as the first Carnage. 9.8 ratios, 29%, a little bit higher than the first Carnage. And for an 80s book, you almost don't want to see that. You want it to be a little bit lower for older books. So yeah, I think this book is, not one that I'm going to be really looking to grab. Especially, just out of this comparison of all of these, it's the most CGC 9.8s and, a pretty high CGC 9.8 ratio at 29% too. I could see why this one's $200 and it could probably just be around $200 for a while. Although, could get some pops going into this Venom 2 movie, you never know. Last book would, as a sort of serious investment grade book too, I would definitely recommend Amazing Spider-Man 252. And, just looking on the census, there's 1,169 of them of CGC 9.8. A lot of those, too, aren't white pages, so this one being a white pages. This is a newsstand version, too, so I'm really so happy to pick this up. And super nicely centered, too. This is, the perfect 252, really. So you get Amazing Fantasy 15 cover homage, obviously. This is kind of one of the first major issues to cover homage Amazing Fantasy 15, which is the first appearance of Spider-Man. And it's tied for Black Costume with Marvel Team Up 141, I believe it is. What is it? Yeah, 141 Marvel Team Up for first Black Costume. And that cover is really cool, too. That Marvel Team Up 141 is, definitely either this book or that book. If you like that other book, that's the Marvel Team Up cover. I know a lot of people that really do. That works, too. I think that's a really cool book. But, this one is just, I think over time, this Amazing Fantasy 15 cover homage is really going to help this book sell well. And, it's not going to be one where, you're going to have to wait forever for it to sell for a really good price or anything like that. And it's got a chance, I think, to, just continually kind of appreciate. And hopefully on the Venom 2 movie, you get a kind of a good pop. Another thing to mention, 11.6% is the CGC 9.8 ratio. And that's, yeah, that's a really like kind of an investment grade 9.8 ratio, I would say. Anywhere where you're below 15% is starting to get like really relatively rare. Yeah, and this, being kind of a mid 1984 book, it's not super old. So yeah, 11.6%, not quite as rare as Amazing Spider-Man 300 at a 5.9%, but 11.6%. Still quite rare for like a really popular 80s book. So a lot of times you see these ratios, like a lot of these other books, in the 20s, which is kind of average. But once you get, knocking on 10% or around 10%, that's a really like investment grade 9.8 ratio. And, kind of someone on the team had mentioned they had purchased one of these in an auction for $390 US. And I thought that was like a screaming deal. Was looking pretty good too in a new case, a direct version, not the newsstand version. But yeah, I would say that's near rock bottom for that issue. So $390 near the rock bottom, anywhere up to like my newsstand was $530, I believe it was. So for like an amazing newsstand, perfectly centered, maybe even $550-ish. So that's kind of the price range on that book. But yeah, you know what? These are I got 4, recommendations, 4 of them. And yeah, the Marvel Superheroes doesn't look the best. The Secret Wars #8 doesn't look the best on the census too. So I actually would kind of recommend these 4 books before that one. And yeah, I think my sort of, the investment grade books are Amazing Spider-Man 300 and Amazing Spider-Man 252. But you don't want to forget about Amazing Spider-Man 361 because, yeah, I just think it's such a classic 90s cover, and that's going to do well over time. And so nostalgic, so many out there. So if like someone, was just a huge Carnage freak and had a lot of money, they could come in and buy like 20 or 30 of these and, really push up the price. And I think that's essentially what has happened with Incredible Hulk 181. So you need kind of a lot of supply to be able for that to happen. So I think, yeah, I just got a feeling about, Amazing Spider-Man 361 First Full Carnage as a book that most collectors are like, oh, it's never going to go up. It's just going to be like $350 forever in the CGC 9.8 white pages. But because there's so many of them, yada yada yada, it's not as good on the it doesn't look that good on the CGC census. So I'd rather buy an Amazing Spider-Man 300, and I kind of get that argument, but I just think you want to buy both. Basically, you don't want to leave Amazing Spider-Man 361 First Full Carnage. Such a classic 90s cover. It is the classic 90s cover for me. Okay, so kind of concluding up, I do think you should and could and, you could hunt for Venom and Carnage comics in this current environment. We're in between the movies. If you buy now, you get a couple books now. When Venom 2 comes out, you can enjoy some of the prices you'll see during that movie probably, because you'll probably see some elevated prices once the trailer hits and all that. But yeah, right now I would think it's pretty much about as good of a time as ever to buy Venom and Carnage comics. So yeah, glad I made the video, and I would totally recommend to hunt some of the keys here. Yeah, Marvel Team Up 141 is tied for first black costume. The first appearance of black costume ever is Marvel Age. I think it's number 12 or something like that. Marvel Age, which was like a promo magazine, and it came out like a couple months or a month or two before Amazing Spider-Man 252 and Marvel Team Up. So that could be kind of under the radar one. I know there was like a cameo of Venom. There's Amazing Spider-Man 298, which I have, which is first Eddie Brock. Cameo of Eddie Brock, so really cool kind of, that could be one you could go. First Todd McFarlane Spider-Man. Yeah, these are just my favorite books, so there's kind of endless recommendations for me, but these are kind of the 4 that I would really recommend, and maybe that Secret Wars #8 if you're on a budget. Alright, yeah, I could rant on about Venom and Carnage comics all day, but thank you very much for watching today, and if you haven't already, please invite you to join the team and subscribe to Team CGC 9.8. Hit the bell, get all our latest notifications. Add me on Instagram and Twitter too. I got all the links in the description below for all that. But thank you very, very much for watching today. Thanks for all your comments and support too. I really appreciate all that. And I'll see you on the next video.